Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take some really complex source material and just give you the roadmap to understanding the core concepts and hopefully understanding them quickly and thoroughly. Today, we are diving into something that I think affects almost everyone who's ever had that dream of working for themselves.
Yeah, that little spark.
That spark and the staggering reality of small business failure. We are basically ripping the plaster off the romantic idea of entrepreneurship by dissecting the E-Myth framework.
And it is a framework that was, is forged over something like 17 years of really intense experience by Michael E. Gerber, who's advising thousands and thousands of small business owners.
Go.
The sources we've got stacked up here, they lay out a truly harsh truth.
Right.
And it's all supported by these, frankly, terrifying numbers that define the chaotic reality of trying to own your own business.
Okay, so let's ground this conversation right away in those numbers. Because if you're listening and you're thinking about starting something, or maybe you've already started,
Right.
You really need to understand the statistical gravity of this whole situation. Every single year, around 1 million people launch a business in the United States.
1 million. And the data tells us that 40% of those businesses fail in the first year alone.
40%.
Think about that for a second. That's 400,000 dreams that just evaporated within 12 months.
And it gets worse, right? Because if you manage to survive that first, brutal shakeout, the failure rate actually speeds up as the business tries to grow. After 5 years, it's over 80%.
That's 800,000 businesses just gone. They've closed their doors. They simply disappear from the map.
And here is the truly devastating part, the long-term kicker for the very few who make it past that 5-year mark.
You think you're safe.
You are not safe. Of those survivors, more than 80% won't last a second 5 years. The odds are they are fundamentally stacked against the small business owner who follows the conventional wisdom. So the central insight we are unpacking today isn't that these owners, lacked passion or commitment.
Not at all.
They worked incredibly hard. We're talking 100-hour weeks, a lot of them. But they were working the wrong way.
Yes.
So this deep dive is all about understanding the core reasons why these businesses just descend into this unmanageable, unpredictable, and ultimately unprofitable chaos.
And our mission today is pretty simple. We want to answer the 4 critical questions that this source material raises. And look, if you understand and you apply these answers, you basically have a blueprint for creating a predictable, profitable, and personally gratifying small business.
But if you ignore them...
If you ignore them, you risk joining that vast majority who just burn out, run out of money, and ultimately have to close up shop.
We're going to go deep into this E-myth and the concept of what's called the key revolution. So, okay, let's unpack this and really start at the root of the problem.
The foundational misunderstanding, the thing that really drives these failure statistics, is all encapsulated in what Gerber calls the entrepreneurial myth, or the E-myth.
Yeah.
It's this deeply romantic, heroic notion. It's particularly big in cultures that celebrate rugged individualism,
Yeah, the lone wolf.
The lone wolf, that businesses are started by these heroic, risk-taking entrepreneurs who bravely fight against, all the market forces.
Okay.
But the sources, they reveal that the reality is it's far messier. It's much less romantic. And here's where it gets really, really interesting for me, because most businesses are not started by classic, capital risk entrepreneurs. They're started by technicians.
Exactly. The technician is someone who is fundamentally excellent at the technical work they do.
Okay.
They're the person who genuinely loves the doing. Think of Sarah, the baker, who can make cakes that just taste like magic. Or Joe, the barber, whose fades are like legendary in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
They're skilled people working for someone else. And then the predictable moment happens. Gerber calls it the entrepreneurial impulse. The technician is grinding away. Maybe they see their boss making what looks like easy money, or they're just frustrated by some arbitrary rules, and then they have that fateful thought.
I could do this better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I can produce this quality for him, and I know as much about this specific skill as he does, why am I making him rich? I can do this for myself.
And that belief system, that very dangerous leap of logic that says technical skill automatically translates into business skill, that is the single greatest cause of this high failure rate.
Because they assume what? That the business of baking is just about baking cakes.
Yes, when in reality, the business of baking is about systems. It's about finance, organization, marketing. The moment that technician becomes the boss, the entrepreneurial dream, almost instantly spirals into what's called the technician's nightmare.
But why does that nightmare happen so fast? I mean, what's the trigger?
It's because the technician, in launching the business, suddenly activates two entirely new, conflicting, and frankly often overwhelming personalities that now live inside their head. The conflict is internal, it's constant, and it's paralyzing.
We're talking about the triple threat here, or maybe it's more of a triple conflict that's inside every single business owner.
That's right. The entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. These three forces are just perpetually at war with each other.
So let's break down that internal dynamic. Let's start with the entrepreneur.
Okay, so the entrepreneur is the visionary. They live exclusively in the future.
Right. The big picture person.
The big picture person, totally. They're focused on the opportunity, the next product line, the breakthrough idea. They despise the present moment because it's slow, it's boring, it's full of tedious details, and they're often profoundly disconnected from the current, messy reality of the business.
Okay, then there's the manager.
The manager lives in the past and the present. They are seeking total order, planning, prediction, control. This personality is just driven by this need for structure and stability.
So the opposite of the entrepreneur in a way.
The complete opposite. The manager is often described as like an intolerant tyrant of detail, a compulsive force whose main goal is to maintain the status quo and make sure that whatever worked yesterday works exactly the same way today.
And finally, you have the founding personality, the technician.
The technician lives only in the present moment. They're hands-on, they love the process of doing the actual work. They see any thinking or planning that the entrepreneur or manager proposes as just pointless delay. It gets in the way of being productive.
So for the technician, if they can't do it, it doesn't get done. And if someone else is doing it.
They assume it's being done wrong.
Exactly.
And the source material uses this really powerful, very relatable analogy to illustrate this constant internal war. It's the person who decides to go on a diet.
Ah, okay.
You're not one person, you're a collection of these conflicting personalities.
So you have the fat man, right? He's sitting on the couch and then suddenly has this moment of revelation when the thin man emerges.
Mm-hmm.
And the thin man, who sort of embodies the manager and the entrepreneur, is compulsive and completely intolerant. He demands immediate, total organization.
Right. Wake up at 5 a.m., run 5 kilometers, cold shower. You have to weigh your breakfast precisely, take the specific bike route to work. The thin man makes these total, unyielding promises to keep the fat man at bay.
And the person commits fully, right? Maybe for 2 days. They're miserable, but they feel morally superior.
Oh, yeah.
But then disappointment hits, a bad meal, a plateau on the scale, or maybe just a cold, rainy morning.
And the fat man, who was never truly gone, he was just waiting. He sees his chance. He whispers, "This is pointless. It's freezing. Just one donut. What difference is that really going to make?"
And boom, the promises made by the thin man are instantly broken by the fat man, and chaos just takes over.
We experience this professional version of that internal disequilibrium when we try to run a business just as a technician. Sarah, who launched All About Pies with so much passion, is the perfect case study.
Right, she spent all her energy on the craft. The oak floors, the beautiful display cases, the perfect ovens.
Yeah.
She was devoted to this methodical, careful process her aunt taught her. That was the technician completely in love with the technical work.
And 3 years later, Sarah is trapped. She's now working 19 hours a day. She's burdened by debt, ordering, cleaning, managing, bookkeeping, all the tasks the technician absolutely hates.
And she ends up confessing, "I not only hate doing all this, but I hate making pies. I can't stand the smell anymore."
Her entrepreneurial impulse promised her liberation, but the lack of a manager or an entrepreneur to handle the strategy and the organization, it turned her passion into the worst job she could imagine.
Working for a lunatic. Herself.
Exactly, and this is the core structural lesson here. A business will inevitably reflect the owner's internal conflict. If the technician is left alone to run the whole show, without the manager to organize or the entrepreneur to lead strategically, the business will just collapse.
Yeah.
Not from lack of effort, but from profound internal disequilibrium and just organizational chaos.
It makes complete sense that the technician is dominant at the start. I mean, they're the reason the product or service even exists. But if the need for order and vision is so critical, why do so few people who start businesses manage to activate that manager personality? Is it just, a lack of training, or is there some kind of genuine psychological block against all that structure?
That's an excellent point. I think it's partly training, but it's primarily psychological. The
Okay.
technician sees systems as restrictions on their personal freedom and their creativity. To create a system like A process for accounting, or a script for sales, is to admit that the work can be done by anyone. And therefore, their unique technical mastery isn't the sole source of value. The manager demands standardization, which the technician equates with boredom and, frankly, a loss of self-importance. They would rather work 20 hours a day and be the indispensable hero than build a system that makes them irrelevant to the daily function. The block is really driven by the ego's attachment to the technical work.
So if that internal conflict sets the stage, then the business life cycle shows us the structural deterioration that follows. It all starts with phase one, infancy.
Infancy is the birth phase, and it's defined by the owner and the business being absolutely indistinguishable. You see it in the names, right? Joe's local barbershop, Mary's sandwiches. The business is a direct extension of the owner's technical skill and their personal energy.
Yeah.
And the business survives purely on the owner's willingness to work 10, 12, even 16 hours a day. They have to be the ultimate master juggler.
And at first, that hard work pays off. The customers love the product because Joe is personally cutting the hair or Mary is personally slicing the pastrami.
Yeah.
So initial success feels fantastic, but that success very quickly breeds unmanageable chaos.
The demand for the technician's skill just soon exceeds their capacity to deliver it personally. The technician is totally ill-equipped to handle growth because their only tool for scaling is more time.
And you eventually run out of time.
You run out of time. The demand increases, and the quality of the service just inevitably declines. Suddenly, Joe is rushing to fit in another client. He gives a bad haircut. Tommy makes printing errors. Mary forgets the special order, and the chickpeas end up in the soup again.
The technician's only response to this crisis is the one they know best. Just work harder.
Mm-hmm.
They try to stretch it to 18, maybe 20 hours a day. But they're juggling way too many rings now, not just the technical work, but the managerial work, the cleaning, the ordering, the financial tracking, all the tasks they hate and are bad at. And the rings just start dropping faster than they can pick them up.
And the defining, desperate moment when infancy ends is when the owner finally realizes that the business they created for liberation has become the exact pattern they sought to escape.
A dreadful boss.
Unreasonable hours.
And a soul-crushing routine. The dream is totally gone, and it's replaced by this self-imposed tyranny.
And this forces the business to acknowledge its limits and enter phase 2, adolescence.
The first visible sign of adolescence is the owner finally admitting they can't do it all. They hire external help. And this is almost always driven by pure crisis, like desperately hating accounting.
Let's use the anecdote of hiring Harry, the 68-year-old retired accountant. The owner hires Harry to take over the dreaded bookkeeping.
And the owner feels this immense relief, right? Believing the problem is just solved.
Solved, but this is the critical moment. Harry is now the only person who knows the business's true, deep secret. The owner has no idea what they're doing structurally.
And this introduces the fatal flaw of adolescence, which is management by abdication. The owner transfers the tasks they hate, accounting, inventory, whatever it is, and then they vanish, thinking they've just bought freedom.
But because there's no system, no managerial structure, that vacuum has to be filled. So Harry, who was hired for bookkeeping, suddenly finds himself overloaded with answering phones, shipping logistics, and customer service.
Why?
Because the owner dislikes those tasks too and just dumped them on the new employee. The owner is acting like a boss who is constantly on vacation.
And naturally, the quality of work from the new, untrained staff starts to deteriorate. The owner is forced to come back, interfere, and act exactly like the tyrannical boss they swore they would never become.
And then you hear that familiar destructive phrase, "Who told you to wrap it like that? Give it to me, I'll do it myself. No one works as hard as I do."
Right. The technician owner realizes that without systems, they're forced right back into that master juggler role, only now they're paying staff who are essentially just waiting around confused or actively creating more mistakes for the owner to fix.
And this realization brings the business right to the edge of the comfort zone. That's the limit of the owner's ability to personally control all the internal chaos.
So growth beyond this point is, what, structurally impossible without some kind of systemic change?
Impossible. The business is now at an unsustainable breaking point, and it has to choose one of 3 paths.
Okay, what's path 1?
Returning to infancy. This is the most common and predictable outcome. The owner scales back, fires the staff, reduces inventory, and goes back to being the sole proprietor, basically just hiding from the organizational demands of adolescence.
And the dream is definitively dead at that point.
It's dead. It's replaced by this tedious tyranny of routine that lasts until the business eventually closes. This accounts for over 400,000 annual business closures in the U.S.
Wow. Okay, so path 2.
Fracture, total spectacular collapse. This happens when the growth is really rapid and uncontrolled, maybe a huge order comes in, or new technology scales the demand instantly. The owner is just overwhelmed running a 20-cylinder engine on one piston.
And they burn out completely.
They burn out, the business explodes, and it often leaves the owner deeply cynical, blaming risk and speed, when the real culprit was the complete absence of a structure to manage that growth.
And that leaves path 3.
Maturity. This is the intended path. It requires the owner to recognize that their technical skill is not enough. It requires defining a viable way forward through comprehensive, systematic planning. The critical lesson of the whole life cycle is that the problems in infancy and adolescence, they all stem from the same root. Prioritizing tactical, operational work over the necessary strategic and entrepreneurial work required to build a functioning entity.
That sounds incredibly stressful, and I think a lot of listeners will probably recognize that moment when they stepped back into the business and thought, you know what, I could just do this better myself. But if the failure rate for traditional businesses is 80% over 5 years, and the instinct is always to go back to being the technician, how profound does the shift have to be to move towards maturity?
The shift has to be total. And it has to be revolutionary. And that's precisely what Gerber calls the key revolution. It's not just a change in your behavior, it's a change in how the owner perceives the very purpose of their company.
Okay, so this brings us to part 3, the key revolution and the mature business.
The mature business is fundamentally different because it's created with a broad entrepreneurial perspective. It's designed consciously to function independently.
So the shift is from working in the business, like the technician who cuts hair, to working on the business.
Yes, like the entrepreneur and manager who designed the machine that cuts hair predictably.
And this revolutionary shift is centered entirely around one concept, the franchise prototype. It's the model that proves that systematization actually works against those terrible odds.
And you just have to look at the data again. Independent businesses fail at an overwhelming rate, over 80% within 5 years. In sharp contrast, U.S. Department of Commerce data consistently shows that franchise businesses, think McDonald's, Federal Express, Disney, they close at less than 5% annually.
Wow.
The franchise model provides the stability and the consistent growth that is just totally absent in that technician-run business.
So we have to look at the genesis of this idea, and the ultimate case study is Ray Kroc's visit to the McDonald brothers in San Bernardino back in 1952. Kroc was, selling milkshake machines?
He was selling milkshake machines, but what he saw was so much more than just a hamburger stand. He saw a system, and it was operating with the flawless, relentless precision of a Swiss watch.
He observed speed, efficiency, cheapness, and the absolutely critical component. Every single product delivered was identical, no matter who was making it. It was the absolute epitome of standardization.
And Kroc's realization at that moment was the pivotal moment for this whole E-Myth framework. The hamburger was the product being consumed by the customer, but the McDonald's system, that was the business.
Oh.
So his primary customer was not the person buying the burger. It was the potential franchisee who wanted to buy the machine that reliably produced predictable results.
And the franchisee's core question is always going to be, if I invest my life savings in this thing, does this really work?
Exactly. So to guarantee success for the buyer, Kroc realized he had to create a business that worked predictably, even if the owner, the franchisee, was a mediocre manager, or, as he famously put it, he designed it to be proof against lunatics.
I love that phrase. So this demanded that Kroc basically adopt the manager and entrepreneur hats full-time. He wasn't focused on perfecting his own burger flipping skill.
Not at all. He was focused on re-engineering every single component of the operation. He was channeling the principles of Henry Ford's production line, but applying them to service.
And the objective was just rigorous standardization, so the entire system could be repeated, 5,000 times perfectly across different cities and cultures?
And this standardization was so granular and it was non-negotiable, it was enforced through systems. For example, specific hard systems dictated that French fries could not stay in the fryer for more than 7 minutes.
Why?
To avoid oil saturation. Hamburgers had to be flipped precisely, and the final order needed to be served to the customer in under 60 seconds, and that was timed constantly. Meticulous cleanliness was mandatory because Kroc understood that the customer correlates perceived quality with price only if the environment is predictable and clean. The discipline, the standardization, the order, that was the product he was truly selling.
And this contrast, it really defines the difference between the doomed technician's model and the successful entrepreneur's model.
The technician's focus starts and ends with themselves. How can I sell what I know how to make? They focus solely on the generic product and their own skill set. They see the customer as a constant source of frustration who demands too much and doesn't want to pay.
But the entrepreneur's focus starts entirely with the customer's needs and expectations. The entrepreneur designs the business, the machine, specifically to satisfy those needs efficiently and predictably. They see the customer as an opportunity because they recognize that every customer has a set of unconscious expectations just waiting to be met.
And the ultimate purpose of designing this franchise prototype is liberation. It's about building a predictable, profitable machine that operates without the owner's constant presence. Only when the business can survive and thrive without the technician at the helm is the owner truly free from having created the worst job in the world for themselves.
I think that idea of designing a business proof against lunatics is fascinating. But it also, I don't know, it sounds a little cold or maybe dehumanizing, especially when we talk about the manager dictating every minute detail. Does this systematic approach leave any room for the creativity and passion that started the business in the first place?
That's a crucial distinction to make. The passion of the technician is for the doing. The passion of the entrepreneur is for the design. The system isn't designed to crush creativity. It's designed to channel creativity toward predictable, high-quality outcomes.
Oh, okay.
The creativity is in the design of the system itself. How can we make this experience better, faster, and more efficient than anyone else? Once the system is perfect, the technician's passion for execution is what keeps it running smoothly. The system liberates the entrepreneur to focus on innovation, working on the next iteration of the machine, not being trapped inside the current version.
So we move now from the theoretical realization, that key revolution, to the 7 actionable strategies for actually building this franchise prototype. This is the blueprint for the mature business. And it starts with the owner's life.
That's right. Strategy 1, the primary aim. The owner must start by defining their personal goals and values, not business goals. You can't design a life-supporting business until you know what kind of life you want the business to support.
And the source offers a really powerful kind of reflective visualization exercise to force this clarity. It says, to imagine your own funeral. Years in the future, you're watching the attendees, your family, friends, associates. And from the 4 corners of the room, tapes are played that have your voice on them, telling the story of your life. What exactly would you want that story to be?
It's a heavy exercise, but it forces the owner to define their primary aim, the personal commitment, what's called the initial calling, the script for the life they actually intend to live, it asks. What do you want to be remembered for? What are your non-negotiable values?
So this aim provides the ethical and moral foundation for every single business decision that follows.
Exactly. If the business plan violates the primary aim, the business plan has to change, not the life goal.
So that leads to strategy 2, the strategic objective. This is where you translate that deeply personal primary aim into concrete, measurable business targets. It answers the question, what specific financial and structural metrics must the business achieve to support the life you just defined?
And this needs to be extremely specific. So if we go back to Sarah's goals, now she's operating with a strategic objective. She defined a requirement of 4 specific locations, and each one has to generate $450,000 in annual sales.
So that's $1.8 million in total revenue.
Right. And the objective mandates a minimum 15% net profit, which is $270,000 total. And crucially, the business must be structured so that it is sellable for over $1 million within 7 years.
Those numbers are vital. They force the entrepreneur to engage with financial reality and the whole concept of value. I mean, the ultimate objective of building a great system is that it can be sold.
Yeah.
If the business relies entirely on Sarah's 20-hour days, its value is 0. But if it's a systematic, predictable machine generating $270,000 in passive profit, the value is high.
And once the personal and strategic parameters are set, you move immediately to creating internal order, which is what addresses the chaos of the technician's nightmare.
So, strategy 3, organizational strategy. This is absolutely fundamental, especially for fixing that Jack and Murray kind of chaos of adolescence. Businesses have to be organized around functions, not around people or personalities.
Right. Imagine Jack and Murray starting a printing business. They're both technicians. They're good at printing. Initially, they just share everything. One day, Jack does sales. The next day, Murray does inventory. They're constantly tripping over each other, blaming each other, and dropping tasks because the roles aren't defined.
So the technician's instinct is, we just need more bodies.
We need more help. But what they really need is structure.
So the organizational strategy demands the owner, first, Create a fully staffed organizational chart, an OC. You start at the top. CEO president, then VPs of marketing, operations, finance, directors of sales, logistics, training, etc. Maybe 11 or 12 distinct roles.
And the crucial step here is that you create this OC before you hire or assign a single person. Jack and Murray have to look at the 11 boxes and realize that they are each filling 5.5 roles.
And that instantly clarifies the work.
Instantly. It forces the owner to see that their job isn't doing the technical work. Their job is wearing the CEO and VP hats, which means they have to define the systems for the other roles.
And then you define clear position descriptions for every single box on that chart.
Yes. And a position description is not a list of tasks like answer the phone, file papers. It has to be a summary of the results required by that position and the strict parameters for evaluation. For example, the technician role description might be, ensure product X is produced according to quality control specifications within 7 minutes, with less than 1% material waste.
And that kind of structure eliminates management by abdication because the accountability is tied to the box, not the person.
Right. If the logistics VP role fails, Jack, who might be filling that box, knows exactly which function needs attention, not just that things are messy.
Which leads to strategy 4, management strategy. This addresses the internal organization of all the processes. The source material argues against relying on superstar employees and instead introduces the powerful rule of ordinary people.
I love this role.
It's great. Extraordinary businesses are those that build systems so robust that they allow ordinary, predictable people to produce extraordinary, predictable results over and over again.
So the system, not the manager's intuition or their charisma, is the solution. And we see this so vividly in the Venetia Hotel anecdote. This hotel achieved exceptional, world-class service standards, not by hiring hospitality geniuses, but by creating systems that guaranteed the outcome.
And the system ensured every single guest received the same attentive service, like a crackling fire in the room, mints on the pillow, their specific preferred coffee in the morning, and their favorite newspaper hanging on the door. This wasn't magic. It was just meticulously documented procedure.
The young hotel director explained that the staff worked off these detailed, color-coded checklists. The housekeeper, for instance, didn't just clean the room. They had a checklist that included auditing the lighting, ensuring the fire was set correctly, and even referenced a drawing of the room layout to confirm every amenity was in the right sequence and position.
So the core value is predictability and just listening. The receptionist noted the customer's preferences one time, and the system took over, guaranteeing that service outcome whether the guest came back in a week or a year. The staff sign off on completion of the work, and they're regularly audited. So the manager's role isn't to bark orders, but to maintain and improve the system.
But doesn't this level of management sound incredibly suffocating to the average employee? I mean, you raised the point earlier about whether it felt dehumanizing, just reducing staff to cogs in a machine.
That's a valid concern. And
Yeah.
if you look at it through the technician's eyes, then yes, it feels suffocating because it restricts their personal way of doing things. But from the perspective of the manager-entrepreneur, the system actually provides security and clarity. The employee knows exactly what's expected, how to achieve it, and how they'll be evaluated. And this framework argues that most people actually prefer that clarity to the chaos and unpredictability of working for a technician who's constantly changing the rules based on their mood or their stress level.
So it removes ambiguity.
It removes ambiguity, which is the technician's worst enemy.
And that leads us directly into the fifth strategy, where the systematic structure meets the human element.
Strategy 5. Personnel strategy, the game worth playing. The sources argue that employees don't just want a paycheck. They want a structure and a meaningful game worth playing that allows them to define themselves and find purpose in their daily work.
The business becomes the owner's dojo like a martial arts practice hall. It's a structured, confined arena for conflict, where employees confront the conflict between the system's demand for discipline and their own natural tendency towards chaos and shortcuts. The system defines the rules, the logic, the ethics, and the commitment required to play the game.
And the key rules of engagement are fascinating. It's things like, never imagine what your personnel want. Ask them and treat them as players in your game. Never create a game the owner isn't willing to play themselves. Ensure there are concrete ways to win small, daily victories that are acknowledged by the system.
And while the underlying strategy must be, sacrosanct, the owner has to change the tactics frequently to keep the game engaging. Crucially, the game has to have meaning, and sometimes it just has to be fun.
And this means your hiring process must screen for commitment to your rules. The hotel's rigorous, multi-step hiring process is the template for this. It starts with an initial written presentation of the idea of the business to all the applicants.
And they don't talk about salary yet. They present the commitment required, the philosophy, the uniform, the rigorous manual review. Only after the applicant has shown a willingness to accept the rules of the game do they move to the individual interview.
Which focuses heavily on personal fit and values alignment, not just on skills.
Right. The system is designed to give the potential employee the chance to make a conscious choice before they start work. They screen out those who believe they know a better way or who only want a loose job. The goal is to hire people who are committed to playing your specific game, ensuring that every employee sees their work, even the smallest task, as a disciplined reflection of themselves.
So strategy 6 brings us back out to the market. Marketing strategy. Just as the entrepreneur starts with their life and their primary aim, the marketing strategy begins and ends with the customer. The owner has to forget what they want to sell and focus entirely on what the customer wants, which is often unconscious.
Marketing relies on two essential pillars. First, demographics.
Ooh.
This is the science of market reality, age, gender, income, education, location, all the tangible facts.
And second, psychographics.
Why?
This is the subtle, often unconscious reality of the customer, their perceived attitudes, expectations, fears, and desires. The source material describes this as the customer's dark subconscious tide of exotic creatures, the underlying emotional drivers.
The example of IBM Blue is perfect here. That specific shade of deep blue was scientifically selected. It wasn't just chosen randomly. It was proven to appeal to the target demographic's unconscious perception of reliability, trustworthiness, and corporate stability.
So a simple switch to an aggressive color like orange, which sits on the opposite end of the preference spectrum, would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic, because it clashes with the unconscious expectation of what a trusted corporation should look like. The color itself is a systematic marketing tool.
And this highlights that critical distinction between the generic product and the specific product. The generic product is the physical thing the customer takes home. A lipstick, a cake, a haircut.
But the specific product is the emotional outcome. Charles Refson, the founder of Revlon, captured this perfectly. In the factory, we make cosmetics. In the store, we sell hope. The generic product satisfies a conscious need. The specific product satisfies an unconscious desire for hope or control or safety or status.
So your marketing and sales strategy has to speak directly to that unconscious tide. And this is achieved through the point-of-power sales process, a critical, soft system that literally scripts every customer interaction to achieve emotional commitment first.
The sales process is entirely predetermined and orchestrated. It has defined steps: the presentation of the appointment, the presentation of the needs analysis, and finally, the presentation of solutions.
And the crucial step is that needs analysis. Instead of just jumping to the product, the salesperson, who's been trained through the soft system, spends time talking about the customer's frustration, their current lack of control, or their problem. They are opening the customer emotionally to the possibility of relief.
Selling is about opening the client to relief, not just closing the deal on a product.
And the system dictates the specific wording. For example, instead of that weak, vague opening, "Can I help you?" the soft system dictates, "Have you dealt with us before?"
And if the customer says yes, the salesperson is scripted to say, "Magnificent, we have a special program for previous buyers." If the customer says no, they say, "Magnificent, we have a special program for those who haven't bought yet." In either case, the response is positive, and it immediately sets up the next logical step in the prescribed system. The entire sequence is based on tested logic, leading to a predictable result, no matter the individual salesperson's charisma.
Finally, we get to strategy 7. Systems strategy integration. Systems are the binding mechanism that holds the entire prototype together. They prevent the chaos that the technician loves to create.
We categorize systems into 3 integrated types. First, hard systems. These are the physical, tangible, and visible things: the store sign, the specific layout of the bakery, the uniform standards, the design of the equipment.
The great example here is the Gerber smudge prevention system. The problem was chronic. Employees were constantly resting their whiteboard erasers against the white walls, creating these blue ink smudges and frustrating managers. And the solution wasn't a memo or a verbal scolding, which are easily ignored soft systems. The solution was a small, physical piece of wood, a simple ridge installed underneath the whiteboard that just prevented the eraser from touching the wall. A hard system solved the human behavior problem, guaranteeing cleanliness without any management intervention.
Second, soft systems. These are the intangible ideas, words, and interactions. The sales script we just talked about is a soft system, so is the hiring interview structure, the standardized training manuals, the process for customer feedback, and the specific language used during conflict resolution. Every communication within the business is an orchestrated soft system designed to achieve a predictable human result.
And third, information systems. This is the data collection designed to monitor the health and performance of both the hard and the soft systems. So this includes inventory control, cash flow statements, sales activity summaries, and customer tracking.
The entrepreneur quantifies everything to gauge the effectiveness of the orchestrated systems. How many leads came in, how many converted, which specific script variation led to the highest close rate, what's the average time a product spends in production. By quantifying the results of the systems, the entrepreneur knows precisely which system needs adjustment or iteration or even replacement.
And the success of the entire development program, from that personal primary aim right through to the marketing execution, depends entirely on the integration and the interdependency of all 7 strategies. The franchise prototype is not a list of strategies. It is the unified integration of these strategies into a predictable machine.
Yeah, if the organizational strategy number 3 is flawed, then the management strategy number 4 will fail. And that leads to chaos in the personnel strategy number 5, and the information systems number 7 will report nothing but confusion. Everything has to flow logically from that deeply personal aim outward to the market.
This systematic journey brings us right back to Sarah. She finally realized her error. She confused the technical skill of making good cakes with the underlying system of care, attention, and mastery her aunt had taught her. The true purpose of starting her business was not to make pies, but to create a viable, self-sustaining machine that could free her from the burden of having a job.
So, what does this entire deep dive mean for you, the learner listening right now? The ultimate reason to create a business is to build it so well that it can be sold or replicated, to build a valuable machine that functions predictably without your necessary daily presence. And this requires you to shed the technician's belief that work equals success and to embrace the systematic organizational approach of the entrepreneur and the manager.
And this shift is incredibly difficult because it's so deeply personal. The source material leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. The chaos you see reflected in the world, and specifically in your business, is not external. It is a direct reflection of the chaos within us.
The small business, when you approach it correctly, becomes the owner's dojo, a controlled environment where you practice self-mastery. It's an arena where you confront your fears, your anxieties, your need for control, and your bad habits. The learning journey is to discover your strengths and weaknesses by constantly measuring your impulsive actions against the predictable, logical system you built.
So the only way to win the game, the only way to achieve liberation, is to embrace the rules of the system that you designed. Your immediate, actionable first step should be to stop working in your business today and start working on it. Define the difference between what you have right now, a confused expression of your technical skills, and what you need, a mature, systematic, predictable machine.
And that difference defines the strategic work you have to undertake tomorrow. It is the roadmap to finally liberating yourself from the tyranny of the technician, allowing you to build a successful business that supports the life you truly want to live.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this exploration helps you master the system so you can master your time. We'll see you next time.